You know that you're talking about volume equaling what? Pi r, was it pi r squared h, but we're not doing, oh, it's 1/3, sorry. So it's going to be 1/3 pi x squared times y. If you were to take the derivative of that, what rule would you have to use? If you were to take the derivative, you'd have to use the product rule. If you were to do that, you'd have to use the product rule. That 1/3 pi, that's just along for the what? Just along for the ride. So that's going to be 1/3 pi times the derivative of the first, 2x times dx, derivative of the first times the second, plus the first times the derivative of the second. So you can do it this way. What do we know? What values do we know? They tell us some of those values. What are some of those values that they tell us? They tell you x and they tell you y. So you got x there as well. So what do you have here? You have 1/3 pi times, does it tell you x? And it tells you dv dt, so that's what, -2, right? Does it tell you x? When the base of the cone and the radius of the cone is what? Oh, 4. Oh, that's the original cone, right? So it's when y is 8, so you plug in 8 for y. We'll keep the x there. dx dt. And what's y? 8 plus x squared dy dt. If we want dy dt, what do we still have to get rid of here? There's two things. We need to get rid of the x's, right? But we also need to get rid of the dx dt's. How do we figure out what x is? How do you figure out what x is if you wanted to do this? You need to use that ratio, right? What do you know? It's 16 to 4 as 8 is to what? 2. So you can figure that out. 16 is to 4 as 8 is to 2, and you plug in again, and you end up with -2 is equal to 1/3 pi times 2 times 2 times dx dt times 8 plus 2 squared dy dt, right? But here's the thing, what's still left? What do you still have to find? dx dt. So if you want to find dx dt, you need to link x and y. What's the relationship between x and y? At this point you realize you have to find the relationship between x and y. You realize you have to find it. What's the ratio you could use? You know that 16 over 4 is equal to what? Y over x. You know that 16 over 4 is equal to y over x. Cross multiplying, what do you get? 16x is equal to 4y, so 4x is equal to what? What can we do to both sides? We could take what do we do now? What do we take on both sides? The derivative. So you get 4 times dx dt is equal to dy dt, right? But we want to substitute, so what does dx dt equal? What does dx dt equal? 1/4 dy dt. So where can we plug this in now? Where do we take this? Where do we put this?
Up there.
We put it right there. So here's the thing. If you do it this way, it's more work because you have to use the product rule. And now, if you found this, y equals 4x, where could you have plugged that in to begin with? All the way at the start. That's what you guys did over there, right? You know that y is equal to 4x, so where do you plug that in? To the beginning equation. If you plug y equals 4x into the beginning equation, what do you end up with instead? If you do that, if you plug that into the beginning, volume is equal to 1/3 pi times what? X over 4, sorry, not y over 4 what? Y over 4 squared times y. Simplify before you take the derivative. Simplify before you take the derivative. If you do that, you end up with volume is equal to 1/3 pi times y squared over 16 times y. So what does volume equal? 1/3 pi times 1 over 16 times what? Y to the what power? 3. This right here, everybody, this is just a what? What is that? That's just a what? That's just a constant, right? So that constant, when you're doing the derivative, is just what? What's that phrase? Just along for the ride. It's just along for the ride. Nothing happens to it. So what do you drop to the front? So dv dt is equal to what?
3.
The 3 drops, so it's 3 times 1/3 pi times 1 over 16 times y squared times what? dy, thank you, not dv. dy over dt. And do we have all these things that we can plug in? Sure. What do we know dv dt is? -2. The 3 cancels there, right? So what do you end up with? Pi over 16. What's the y? It says when. In this question tells you when that you're figuring this out when y is equal to 8. So you have 8 going in right there. So it's 8 what? Squared times dy dt. So if you want to cancel some of this, 16 is the same thing as 8 times 2, right? So you cancel that, and you cancel one of the 8s, right? So what do you end up with? Negative 2 is equal to pi over 2 times what? 8 times what? dy dt. That cancels with that, and you end up with 4. Is that correct? Divide both sides by 4 pi, and you end up with negative 2 over 4 pi is equal to dy dt. So what does that equal? So dy dt is indeed equal to negative 1 over 2 pi. And what are the units on this? It's depth. Inches per what? Minute. So most of